So welcome everyone. Thanks so much for being here. This is one of a series of events this week in our Contemplative Community Week. This week is an initiative brought by our Contemplative Community Initiative here at St. Hall, which generally is just trying to promote more connection on our campus to help people to go deeper into their teaching and their learning, and just to promote wholeness, more healthy environment here at the university. This today is the first in our Kata Holos conversation series. And very pleased to have Dr. Marianne Lloyd as our first conversation partner. So I'll say a little bit about Marianne in a minute, but we gave this funny title to this conversation series, the Kata Holos series. So that's it's a Greek phrase from which we get the word Catholic. So often Catholic, it can be translated as universal, but more literally, Kata Holos means towards the whole. And so as a Catholic university that is trying to nurture a more holistic education, is trying to nurture the wholeness of all people who are part of this community, we thought it'd be fitting to have this Kata Holos series in which we're talking about how some of us are striving for wholeness here at St. Paul University. So as I said, as we were thinking about who would be a good conversation partner in this, Marianne Lloyd came right at the top of the list. Dr. Lloyd is a professor of psychology with an expertise in memory. She is a much beloved teacher and a wonderful colleague at the university, absolutely selfless in her service, doing seemingly everything here, maybe rivaled only by Mary Balkan.
I don't know, I think she's got me beat. Certainly in the beloved Catholic.
You teach, beloved.
But beyond all that, in getting to know Marianne personally, I've found her to be someone that Father Colin Kay, if he were here, would certainly say a good human being. But also I know Marianne to be someone who is very persistent in her quest for a life that is whole and balanced, and trying to share that with other people as well. So thanks for being here, Marianne.
Thank you for asking.
So we're Marianne and I are gonna have a conversation, maybe the next 40 minutes or so, and then in the last 15 or 20 minutes of our time together, we'll invite all of you to jump in and ask questions or just share your own reflections, or just generally be a part of the conversation. And feel free to continue enjoying your lunch and your coffee and things as we do that. Okay, so to start off. We're here talking about pursuing some kind of wholeness in life. What does that mean for you? What is when you, in your mind's eye, when you think about the life that you want for yourself? What does a whole life look like for you?
All right, so I'm just going to give you instructions first, which is if I talk too fast, tell me. And that's part of my answer. And what I've been working on is thinking about what do I want as opposed to accumulating more and quickness, right? Less of a consumer mindset and more of a thoughtful and deliberate way of being. And so I think when I think about what having a whole life is, the two words I think that are most important to me are love and kindness. And so that love is from what you might predict very traditionally, that like in hopefully 5 hours and 18 minutes, my dad will be landing in Newark Airport. He hasn't gotten to visit New Jersey since the pandemic started. because he has a liver transplant and just didn't feel safe. We've been coming home, but he hasn't been coming here. So that's sort of like familial, my spouse, my child. But also, you know, I like people. Like, as one of my colleagues quips, like, you saying you like someone isn't very diagnostic. You like everyone. And it's kind of true. Like, I like people for all of the ways that they are different and interesting. And so for me, a full life needs to have a lot of relationships and time with others in it. And again, but, you know, some of which are very, that's why I love teaching. Because you get to, that's a huge part of my life, feeling whole. I couldn't imagine, we need good administrators, they're very important, but I can't imagine not being in the classroom. I love that part of my life. So relationships are part of having a whole life. I am a person of faith, and that is an important part of my life. I've tested not doing that, and the kindness goes way down. Like, I'm not someone that can do, like, I kind of need to tap into this idea of a higher power that's very loving. Otherwise, like, I don't have enough of that myself. I become not as nice kindness. So I don't know if you want to ask a follow-up, but I would say a full, rich life is one that's really abundant in relationships, in love, and in kindness.
So maybe just to go a little further into the relationships, the people, you like people. I mean, maybe you can contrast it for us. I mean, what is lacking when you don't have people in your life? And you know, we've all had a good test case of this the past few years. So I mean, what is it? Why is it important for you to surround yourself with other people?
I mean, I'll give a psychological answer that we're social beings, and I'm high on
We
that.
anticipated that might happen. That's fine.
I am high on the extroversion scale, right? So it is nurturing for me. But I also think, you know, I bought into that element of the Catholic perspective, right? That when we are with other people, that is also a chance for us to experience something higher than ourselves. And so I think a lot of times, for me, being with people isn't just a social experience, but it can be like a low level, like, spiritual experience as well, because I think, you know, I'll talk psychological again, right? We've got like all these dimensions to who we are, and I'm very limited in what ones I express. And I'm curious about the full scope of humanity, and so if I'm not with people, I'm like only with the Marianne level, which is like lovely for like doing a t-test in statistics, but it's terrible for art. Like, my drawings are horrible. During COVID, I was pod children, you know, we were podding with these kindergarten twins, and literally the 5-year-old was drawing better stuff than me by like the third week of kindergarten. So I think that's one of what's lacking, is I just sort of feel like I'm missing out on what the world has to offer. Because I have such a, you know, the stats term would be my R squared. My proportion of variance accounted for in humanity. It's narrow. It's narrow.
I was just having a conversation with some of my students about this. You know, the fact that we're really better off when we're around other people, and you know, speaking from a Christian perspective, it seems like part of the reason that we have some Lonerganians in the room, so I'll pander to the crowd here and say that Lonergan would say that we experience our authenticity and self-transcendence, and you know, I certainly find that that's part of the benefit of being around other people I like and people I don't like so much, is I'm drawn out of myself. That, you know, like you said, life, there's sort of less variety in life when it's just you, and you know, there can be something nice about that sometimes, that you know, it's controlled, but I certainly find that life is fuller, and I would say better, when I'm not just left to my own devices, that I do get sucked out in that kind of way. Are there, you know, again, talking about just people and the people that you spend your time with, are there, is it just anyone, like you just want to be around any old body, or are there certain kinds of people that you seek out? Are there certain characteristics in certain people in your life who you find make you better, who you find that life is fuller, more rewarding, richer when you're with those kind of people.
Yeah, for sure. So I think funny is super important. It's probably my favorite characteristic of my spouse. And he's got like a really like low key, you gotta listen, dark, deep sense of humor, right? He's not boisterous, but he's he's quick witted. So I really appreciate humor. And I think that and this is the trouble when you talk to me. It's like, well, I'm answering now. Would this answer have been 20 years ago? I don't know. But right now, as a 44-year-old mother of an 11-year-old, I really like to be around people that have experiences and knowledge that I don't have. So my running partner has an undergrad degree in theater and she's doing cool like social justice work, food stuff, partnering with New York Water Coalition. It has gotten very good at roller skating. All of that is like so interesting to me. So I think, but again, aligned with my values. So I think that is, yeah, I like people that are maybe similar to me in some, core ideas that, humanity is not made of worthless, horrible people that are out to get us. As my grandmother used to say, I'd rather trust everyone and be disappointed occasionally than the opposite. And so I like to be, around people with a level of, I won't even say optimism, because I don't know that it's optimism always in the people that I like, but just a baseline level of caring, I think, too, is important.
So you just mentioned you've clearly gained some wisdom from your grandmother. You mentioned that you're a person of faith, and that informs how you're living. Can you say something more about that? Because presumably this vision of wholeness that you're living into, it's not just trial and error. It sounds like you've had some guidance. You've maybe appropriated something that was handed on to you, and something. So can you say, what have you gained from others, from a tradition? Where's that coming from?
Sure. I'll try to be efficient in my answer because it could be long. So my parents are both Catholic, and when I was little, I would have joked that my dad's hobby was building model trains and my mom's hobby was Catholicism, because she was in prayer groups and she was a secular Franciscan and she was a Eucharistic minister. Now that feels unfair because my dad is equally involved in the church and is a Eucharistic minister. And I don't remember, but apparently they taught religious education when I was younger. And I think what's important in sort of who I am, they bought the house that my dad still lives in 45 years ago. So I only grew up in the one parish, and I grew up with parents that lived the faith. So the secular Franciscans in which my mom was engaged, their ministry in the early 90s was with some of the early HIV and AIDS persons that lived in our community. And so I think that was, I've got my prayer of St. Francis bracelet on. It was my mom's, right? So I think that my mom really, if you don't know that prayer, I won't read it out loud, but I can get you a copy later. But I think she did try to live as an instrument of peace. And so I think that helps me, in contrast to some of my friends that I think had a less pleasant faith upbringing, more in fear and threat, and God's mad at you or God's judging you all the time. That wasn't it at all. It was like God really loves you, gives you a week, which I now has 168 hours in it. You can give back an hour, right? That was kind of the reason that we had a faith life. It wasn't fear-based. It was, I guess maybe in some ways gratitude-based, and just that idea that there was something beyond us that was important to tap into. So, and my grandmother as well was also I have lots of memories of her sitting in, she had like one of those, big hair dryer things that you put your curlers in and sit under. Like I have memories of her sitting with her prayer books and lots of rosaries. The first time my spouse came home, he was like, look, your parents are nice, but there's a lot of Jesus in this house. Like, and when you grow up that way, like, you almost become immune to it. But yeah, there is, now that I go home and look for it, it's like, oh, you're right, there is. Yeah, my mom made rosaries. But I should say I'm talking about my mom in the past tense because she died in 2013. But really, yeah, a strong, but in a way that, whereas I think lots of my friends left, I think it was not as hard for me to stick around.
Mm-hmm. So as you've been sticking around, and you do have this vision of a whole life that you want for yourself. We've been talking about especially the people who are a part of your life. So that's sort of, that's the vision, that's the goal. How are you working towards that? What are the sort of, the habits that you try and cultivate, the kind of person that you try and be? What are the concrete steps that you're taking to try and live into that vision?
All right, I'm going to give you this answer. That's good. I think you should all know this may not work for you. Two things: spreadsheets and my roommate from my first year of college. So I love, and I will say this is not an empirically validated framework, but Gretchen Rubin, who's written some books on happiness, has like a personality framework where she divides people into being upholders, obligers, questioners, and rebels, and it has to do with how you deal with outside and internal expectations. And I'm an upholder. I love expectations. I love my own expectations. I love your expectations for me, for how this is going. I would like to meet them. And so I set a lot of standards and goals, and then I track those. So one of the things she encourages you to do is write whatever the year is, list. So right now it's 22. So I have a 22 in 22 list. And so that contains items to help on my wholeness, like move 2,022 kilometers over the course of the year, whether that's running, walking, biking, skating. It has things like this month I deemed Spirastical September, which is the combination of the words spiritual and statistical, because I was working on learning R programming software 22 minutes a day for 22 days in a row, but also tracking how often I get to mass. I do a time tracking, every half hour, what am I up to sort of keep myself on task. I go to a mindfulness class every week. Yeah, I'm happy to go over all items. And so then once a month, I taught my college roommate also has one of these lists, and we have a multi-hour phone call where we go through our progress on that list and sort of see where we are and what we have upcoming and what we want to do. So it is intensely deliberate in a way that people that I know would find it stifling and make it unfun. But for me, discipline brings me a lot of freedom and joy. So for some people that sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Or why would you have 22 things? That's too many things to think about.
Yeah.
But that's my answer, spreadsheets and friends.
Yeah. No, I'm just struck that for a lot of people, former Catholics, maybe that this is one of the kind of things that people will talk about sometimes is they wouldn't use the language of expectations, but all the rules. There are all these things that you're supposed to do, and to some it does feel stifling. But for you, it sounds like that's something that you've actually found to be a gift and a support in your life, actually.
Yeah, and I ignore some of the rules too. But yeah, no, I don't. I love that you can go to a mass basically anywhere, and there's a formula.
Yeah.
That happens.
So maybe looking back over the years, is there any particular project you had set for yourself in a year, a particular practice, something that something concrete that you were trying to do that now you look back and you think that was kind of a game changer, like your life is really in a different place, you're a different kind of person because you had committed to doing this thing? Does anything like that come to mind?
Yeah, I think when the pandemic started, I started doing these mindful life classes that Jean Vetrano in Maplewood teaches, and what was so useful for that, for me, for that practice is I'm a cognitive psychologist. I want to think all the time. I automatically default to and quantitative. And in that class, we do a lot of exercises where you're not allowed to do that, where you're using more of a, thinking about emotions or just kind of bodily response. I mean, body stuff is so hard for me. Where are you experiencing this in your body? And it's, in some ways, I think that I was fine with doing that at Mass. I love to sing the songs. I love the sacraments, right, which are not just thinking, but that I think is sort of compartmentalized there, and this has helped me do that in sort of other spaces in my life and thinking about how can I teach whole people in my classroom? It's not just, do you know what an independent and dependent variable is?
So say a little bit more about that. When you want to teach whole persons, and presumably you want to be a whole person yourself. So what does that look like? What does a whole person look like?
So I think one of the things I do is I use an alternative grading scheme, specifications grading. So you don't just have one chance to earn points on things, you have ways to redo work, and it lets people show that they've learned at the pace that they learn. So not thinking of students as competing with each other, but the individual is showing progress. And then I use things in my classes, like when they respond to a journal article, the first thing they do is they write about their own experience, and at the end they write about what they can do with the information, like bringing it back to, okay, well, what does this matter to you? There's things in there where they're relating the content to what we're learning in class, and there's a way for me to check to make sure they understood what happened in the article, but I'm also interested in sort of how's this going to play out for you. And then I use these socio-emotional learning exercises that are supposed to help reduce anxiety that I've checked with students, and they find them to be helpful. So that might be gratitude practice, meditation, self-compassion. This week's is about finding your network of support, things like that. So making space in my classes for more than I will dump this information into your brain and then you will regurgitate it out to me, and I will feel so great about how I've transformed your research methods knowledge base.
So you're doing this work for your students to try and help them to be more whole human beings. Where do you find the support to do that for yourself? And I ask that knowing you. I mean, you've already given us, so you're doing this, mindfulness class, talking with your college roommates. Are there other places, there are other sources that help you to be that fuller kind of person?
Yeah, I mean, my running partner luckily lives right across the street. So that's someone, there are many weeks that I say more words to Shannon than I do to my own husband because we spend 7 hours a week together. So that's one strong source of support, because, as I mentioned before, she's, has such different perspectives than me. She can often really say, like, oh, Marianne, have you thought about looking at this way? Or, like, maybe you'd want to try X. So I think that's one thing. And making time for things that aren't work is super important. So I put 3 half marathons out of town on the calendar for fall, and I went to Connecticut a few weeks ago, and I'm going to go over the break. I'm going to go to Virginia, and then we have one in Delaware. So that's one thing that I like to leave. Go do things, and I'm very, very devoted to sleep. Like, that is, I think, the most important thing to be doing if I want to enjoy being around me, and if other people want to enjoy being around me. Like, it is like I have a very regimented bedtime. I'm a morning person, so I don't mind, I don't go to a lot of parties because they happen too late. If people would like to have fun at 8 in the morning, I'm so ready. But this 8 at night starter, it's like once or twice a month I can get together for that, but generally not.
So I think you just said something about, okay, so you block out this time, and you take these trips, you're committed to doing these half marathons, which, and by the way, Marianne ran the Boston Marathon this past spring, so she's no slouch over here, with COVID.
Accidentally with COVID. I wouldn't knowingly run a marathon with COVID. That would feel unethical.
As if it weren't hard enough. So I suspect that's something that people will be pretty interested to hear about, is how you try and manage time, because I assume I'm safe on saying this, this is something that we all feel like we never have enough time. We're always racing against the clock and deadlines and things like that. So could you say a bit more about that? It sounds like you clearly actually put things on your calendar. What about even within each day? Like, how do you manage your time in a way that helps you to live a fuller kind of life?
Sure, and I want to say, if you want to read a lot about this, if this is interesting to you, Laura Vanderkam has several books on this, including the book 168 Hours, and her new book, Tranquility by Tuesday, is going to have a bunch of habits that people that seem happier with how their life goes do those things. So I'll give some highlights while recognizing some of this comes from her work. Mm-hmm. So on Fridays, I plan for the next week, and I have an ongoing Google Doc that just divides up teaching, research, service, and other, and I put in everything that I know is going on. So some of it's pretty repetitive. Teach Monday, Wednesday, office hours, Tuesday, Wednesday, grade whatever assignments are coming in. and then under other, it's any social events that I have. And then so that's how I deal with the weekly level, and then I look at my week and figure out when to plug in the things that aren't already bucketed. And I do use a paper planner as well for daily planning. And then for the month, I also sort of do monthly goals to say. For example, another item on this list is watch 22 movies, because since I'm someone that likes to go to bed really early, I don't watch a lot of media, but I feel like that also makes me out of touch with culture. So, I might say, okay, well, my goal is to do 2 movies this month. So I think, some of it is by setting a goal to do things that I will have wanted to do. Like I'm protecting my future self is often how I think about it. Like this Friday, Marianne knows that she wants to have some things happen. 3:00 in the afternoon, Wednesday, Marianne does not want to grade or whatever, but I've already sorry, my past self set it up. And then at the kind of minute at the moment level, I'm at my best when I'm using Pomodoro for time management technique, which is to set a 25-minute timer and work on only one thing for 25 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break. And after 4 of those, you get to take a longer break. And so then, again, it's like tricking myself. Like, okay, you don't want to keep writing this middle states report that's due on the 1st, but you've only got to do it for 25 minutes. Hypothetically, there might be a middle states thing due on the 1st. You set a 25-minute timer, and that really, that helps. That helps. So it is. It's a lot of tracking, pre-planning, discipline. I listen to podcasts about time management often, while doing the dishes or whatever. But because it's super interesting to me.
It sounds like in a way it's a form of self-compassion. You're showing compassion for your future self. I'm recalling a Simpsons episode where Homer is, eating 50 hot dogs or something like that, and thinking about his future self. He's like, boy, I'd hate to be that guy. So clearly you're not doing that to yourself.
Exactly.
It's a good thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so far we're getting the picture. You're this superhuman person that you are uber organized, running marathons. Where are the challenges? In terms of life here at this university, but obviously that's not the whole of your life. You have a family, you have other relationships, you live in a world. Where do you find that it's challenging to? What are the obstacles that kind of get in the way between you and this more whole life that you want for yourself?
Yeah, great. It's good. We were just working on this in Mindful Life class, right? So where I feel out of balance is that my research program is not as strong as I would like it to be, because it can be easily usurped by teaching and service. And so that would be a place where I could use some tweaking and adjusting. And it would probably be good if I was less quick to yell as a parent. Right? So one of my answers before, I forgot to give my real answer. The reason I can do all this is I only have 1 kid, Patrick, but it is too late for you to take that piece of advice that stopping at 1 kid, it just changes all of the dynamics about how many pieces.
If you want to send your 1 kid over to distract my 3 kids,
that's right, I could.
Help.
That's right, we both win. I think that is, especially if I'm feeling very pressed for time, I'm quick to get frustrated.
And can I ask you about the research? Now, when you say you wish you could be doing more in that area of your life, is that you? Is that because this is part of what you envision as an ideal, a more whole kind of way of life, that I have more time to be engaging in the scholarship that I enjoy, or is part of that more, you talked about expectations and people's expectations for you. Is this more that you feel this is something you should be doing? It's something that's kind of demanded, or so is this something that you want for yourself, or that you just kind of feel like you should be doing, or kind of a mix of those things?
No, it's definitely something that I miss. And I have 4, things that I should have worked on in August for IRB projects, some of which are teaching related research and some of which are things in my lab. So it is partly feeling like that part of myself. My main conference is psychonomics, and they call ourselves psychognomes. And I'm the treasurer of the Psychonomic Society and the incoming secretary. And so I don't like feeling like I can go to these meetings and take a lot of minutes, but I'm not part of the intellectual conversation of all my colleagues around the table. Because I do care about memory, and I do love the joy I get when you first get a fresh data set and you go to analyze it and you like wait with tingling anticipation to look at your p-values. I mean, that is a source of delight in my life. So I think that is, yeah, that's definitely like something I want to think about rearranging and moving space for. But that I've also have the pressure, once you're full professor, other than merit pay, there isn't like the expectations have sort of left. But there is, my department values student research experience too. So there is like a level at which I have some external pressure from the department because I want students to have a good research experience in my lab. And part of that means having IRB approved projects so that we can be collecting data and talking about it. So it is a little bit of letting myself down, but also feeling like I want my students to have a good experience because they may find that they want to be cognitive psychologists. It's low probability. It's only a few % of PhDs, but maybe they're out there. So I want to make sure that I'm setting up the space.
More generally speaking, do you feel that there sometimes or often a tension between this vision you have for yourself and the kind of person that you want to be, and the expectations of the people, the world around, of the university, of family, friends, just the images of the ideal person or woman or American or whatever that just come at us in our culture and social media and advertisements and things like that? I mean, are there tensions there for you?
I mean, I think there would be. I think the nice thing about the academy and my department and Seton Hall is I don't feel that. I often go back to a memory of meeting someone when I had my kid and I was in a new moms group and she worked at Condé Nast, the magazine company, and she said that they called it Condé Nasty because you would just get in an elevator and people would just look you up and down and sneer at your choices. I have never felt like my colleagues sneered about my clothing choices, and now that I have an 11-year-old who's starting to get really invested in this, I'm like, well, you got to find somebody else. You got to talk to your backup mom because I'm not going to be helpful there. So I think that it is countercultural, but I think that I've set up my life so that it doesn't even feel that way. But I think it would in other industries and in other sectors. I think it easily could feel that way. And in Maplewood and South Orange, sometimes I'm at book club, and thankfully I'm comfortable enough with myself to be like, oh, well, I'm cool with who I am. But I think that in my 20s, I would have been like, who are these fancy people, and why am I at a book club with them? It feels, the one lady was the interior designer for Gretchen Rubin at the other book club, and I was like, get the heck out of here, right? Picking out her wallpaper? I'm just listening to her podcast. But then I've also found that people that are like that are also usually pretty nice.
So, I mean, you went over this very quickly, but this is not an insignificant thing that, you feel you're kind of secure enough in yourself that these things don't really affect you. I think that's a thing that a lot of people are striving for and feeling like they're coming up short. So when you say that's something that you work to, I mean, how exactly did you get there? That in itself is quite an accomplishment.
I mean, I think part of it you can't deal with. I didn't have a super critical set of parents, right? I think that's the first thing is that I was very much raised with the people are lovable because of how they act and who they are, not because of how they dress or their makeup skills or their income or their these other kind of things that I think are the sometimes sources of pressure. So I think that was the first advantage that I have, and I don't want to having had lots of conversations with people about unsupportive parents, I don't want to undervalue how much that makes life easier. And I remember when I moved here, I was in my late 20s, and I joined a running group where everyone was a good chunk older. I was somewhere between 40 and 50. And I remember them talking about just how much in your 40s, you just stopped caring as much what other people thought. You just were like, oh, whatever. And so I think that
you should see my biking outfit.
A level.
Great example.
Yeah, there's just a level of, that was totally true, right? It was I hit my 40s and I was like, oh, I mean, I guess I could spend my time worrying about this person, what they think of me, but it's not I can again take a statistical angle approach, right? So maybe they spend 10 seconds being like, oh, where she got that top, But that's like 10 seconds out of 168 hours in a week, which I can't do that math fast enough. But 10 seconds is not a strong proportion. So allowing that weight to be too strong, I think just makes you kind of, it's like a formula for unhappiness, and I don't really enjoy negative emotions, so I actively try to do things that keeps that away. So I think that also helps, right? Like wanting to, like ignoring some of those inputs. And yeah, and I'm not on, like I don't spend a lot of time like on Instagram. And I don't have a strong sense of FOMO. You know, some people with running, they like have a lot of FOMO for people that are really fast, and I'm not really fast. I'm just like, I get my money's worth when I take more time on a race course, right? We all pay the same entry fee. If you finish too fast, you've just, your dollars per minute were much higher than my dollars per minute.
And in the closing minutes here, any I don't know, anything that we haven't touched on that you think would be important to say about the life that you're trying to live?
I mean, I think what's really important is giving yourself the time and space to figure out what is really, truly, authentically you.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires like a lot of quiet, a lot of maybe digging and being okay with being uncomfortable. My friend and colleague Roxanne Donovan calls this our messy, imperfect selves. I think the more that we can accept that being a messy, imperfect self is the deal, and this again like goes back to that that's what our faith teaches us, right? If you are not Mary or Jesus or God, like you're flawed. Like that's it. There's no one else has gotten the perfect hand. So trying to be perfect is going to make that unpleasant. And so be okay with other people being disappointed if you aren't actively trying to hurt them. And I think that's super important, sometimes for faculty, but I think especially for students, right, whose parents might be bringing expectations about their major, about later, like who's they're going to marry, how many kids they're going to have, all sorts of things. So I think taking the time to be quiet enough to figure out if we want to really go to like a Catholic answer to this, right? The idea is that all of us are giving some piece of that R squared of who God is. Maybe God doesn't think of it as R squared, sorry God. But like we're some kind of reflection of who God is. And so the more that you can figure out what that's supposed to look like as opposed to what you want it to look like or what you think someone else wants to look like, I think that's time well spent to do so. And that can change. I was not an extrovert in high school. Sure am now.
It's and just to kind of bring things back full circle, I'm struck by the balance in what you're saying, that we started off the conversation talking about people and how you really enjoy people and need people, and yet you're also telling us at the end here that to have the time by yourself and in the quiet is also really important. And I might surmise that it's you're able to bring a better self to those relationships, into that time with other people, because you've had that time in the quiet to figure out who you want to be. Fair statement?
Fair statement. Minimum of 2.2 minutes of meditation at least 22 days a month. Right? Yeah, totally fair.
Wonderful. Thanks, Marianne.
Thank you.
So let me welcome everyone.
Do you want to record Q&A? I don't know if people feel more or less enthusiastic to talk if Q&A is recorded.
Yeah, we can. Let's keep it rolling for now, and if people say anything that they feel is embarrassing, we can cut it out later on. So let me invite all of you into the conversation at this point. What questions, reactions to what Marianne has shared with us?
I'll get it going. I think a theme that I hear running through everything you said, Marianne, is you're constantly seeking and searching as opposed to settling. And I think that's the key to life in many ways, to keep the seeking going. And you're never, to put another S word in here, you're never really satisfied, are you?
I mean, I'll push back. I would say
Okay.
I'm extraordinarily satisfied with my life. Like I feel almost like overwhelmed if I really take it all in by how much goodness I have, and I want to recognize how much of that is out of my control. Like whether we want to talk about health or
Sure.
other things I don't control over. But I think that you can be both satisfied and and seek at the
Okay.
same time. And I think that seeking from a place of satisfaction baseline means that you're probably more likely to be moving in ways that will be continually. I mean, I like to think that I remember my lab brother in grad school being like, dude, the chronic quest for self-improvement is exhausting. So I'm trying not to act as if it's a chronic quest for self-improvement, but instead looking for joyful abundance. So coming more from a positive spin.
And I like the word joyful as opposed to happiness.
Yeah,
Does that make
joy
joyful
doesn't
is-
always feel good, right?
No, and joy is more of an inside job.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, I have deep joy when I think about my mom, but that's paired with deep grief that she's not around to see this child that I named for her, turning into this totally amazing and sometimes frustrating. Maybe we should leave that on there. She'll never watch it. Person. Yeah.
Next meeting.
Hi. I was just wondering, I was struck by how much I also like to plan things. I'm not quite to the same extent or in the same way, but I was just wondering your thoughts on like spontaneity or when some, I don't know if you'd say like disaster or if something comes and throws a wrench in your plans or an opportunity comes up, do you find yourself saying, no, I need to watch this movie at 4 p.m. today and I cannot go to this poetry reading or whatever? So I'm just wondering your thoughts on sort of balancing planning versus allowing other, things to happen.
So that is the negative side of the upholders, is we can be rigid, right? So I have to be conscientious of that, which is why another item on my list was take Joyce 22 new places, so that seeking out that novelty was part of it. I mean, I think that if you're going to ask me to do something spontaneous, don't make it at night, right? Because that's going to be a no-go. But I do try to leave space, to quote Karen Eichler, who was quoting the Benedictines yesterday, right? A life that's full but not busy. So if your life is full, you have those. And in fact, my friend Sarah's word of the year is margin. She's trying to build in margin in her life purposely so that there is that flexibility as well. So yeah, I think that is super important. And we know from research on happiness that those sort of things can often be even better than we expected them to be in terms of bringing us fulfillment.
Yeah, I also struggle with that, like the same thing. So, but yeah, so because even coming to this, I wasn't in my plan for the week, but I found out about it, and I thought, I'm glad I came. So, yeah, thank you.
And I think when it's aligned to your values, it's easier, right? If this is something that feels valuable to you,
right,
for a reason, I think that's different. So that's probably how I would answer it. It's like, okay, well, what is this going to bring me? And will it bring me a negative consequence, right? If I have a long run the next day, it's probably not a good idea because no one wants to run with someone who's grumpy. Yeah, I'll get you that.
So can you share any advice or insight stories just for like college students and how like you've got into a place in your life where you're more balanced and can like contemplate and think about things in a way that's like, very powerful? Just curious.
Yeah, that's tough. Honestly, and I don't give my ex-boyfriend a lot of credit, but I think that my college boyfriend was sort of helpful for that because I was like a very, studious, very serious high school student, and he was not those things. And some of my friends were like, "I can't believe you're dating that guy. Do you know who that is?" So I think that is part of it, right? Like finding people that can complement your spaces. I'd encourage you to think about developing a spiritual practice, however that fits for you, right? For some people that is aligned with a higher power, but for other people it might be more of a more secular version of things. I think that can often be, making time for that can often be a way to do these things that are, I think, thinking about systems instead of goals or outcomes, right? So but these are all things that are hard to do, right? Being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? That's, again, easier to do when you have a salary in a house. It's less easy to do when you're, working as a waitress at Friendly's, which is what I was doing in college for $2.13 an hour. And, the tickets don't run very high at Friendly, so it wasn't a high yield. And maybe finding also people that want to have those conversations too. I think that can help sometimes. One of the things we do in our mindful life class is we do a lot of times where you like have 5 minutes to talk and you're just holding space with a partner and you can't respond or make suggestions, which is incredibly hard for me, and it's been such a good practice, but just having someone else hold the space for what you want to talk about is really powerful. So that would be, so you can find a space for one person. But do you have a specific thing that you're knowing on, like changing your major, go talk to your career center advisor, right? I think some of the answer is, or break up with that person, I think is also, I mean, thankfully my cognitive professor was like, listen, I don't care where he gets into law school, like go to the best grad school you can, which is great because we broke up soon thereafter and he wouldn't have been good forever. So I think that's other my, right? Be open to change and continuity.
I think more like building and sticking with healthy habits.
Oh yeah. So I would recommend that you swing by my office and borrow my copy of Better Than Before, which has 21 strategies for habit change and has you think about how you fit on a number of variables that will help make it easier to do that. Because you sort of have to figure out what kind of person are you before I can give good examples. Like, do you love the idea of making a spreadsheet?
Yes, I have
Okay.
many.
Great. So
Kindred spirits.
do you like to tell other people when you've been successful?
No.
Okay, so you were just totally for yourself, right? So like I recommend, make yourself a Microsoft Excel sheet. I'm not supposed to have a Google sheet probably. And write what those habits are, write the dates along the top and, or print it out and put stickers on, but love stickers. I think that probably for you, creating that accountability will be helpful. Good. I'm glad that was your answer. That makes it easier. If you're a rebel and you don't want expectations, their tagline is "No one can tell me what to do, even me." That's much harder.
I gotta look at this book too.
Okay.
But I cannot top that question, but it actually relates to something that I was going to say. Now, I am the opposite. I like Excel spreadsheets for analyzing data. I too love analyzing data. But I'm terrible with analyzing my time and myself. I suspect I would fall into that don't tell me what to do category. But one of the things that actually relates to your comment is that many, many years I was a huge list maker. And I realized that things I would think were goals were actually things I thought I should do. And on top of having a really scary calendar and working a lot at home as well as at work, I realized that work was absolutely dominating my life, but also that these lists had become not a source of joy of crossing things off, but grounds for intimidation and avoidance. So I stopped list making. But what your comment reminded me of when I was in grad school, and I had quite a few friends in grad school who would say, how are you doing? We'd ask after each other. And one of my friends once turned around to me and said, whenever I ask you how you're doing, you say things like, I just finished chapter 4. I just analyzed this. And I think that idea of being chained by your own expectations is actually can really constrict, what's the word I'm looking for, confine? Mold you in the wrong way if you try to do it too much, that you feel like then you have to live up to it. I mean, I guess I'm saying that because I'm a very different person than you are. I am horribly disorganized, and you would be shocked at my life. But I do think there's a case of taking these are my goals and I damn well better meet them too far. But I don't know if that's kind of just me being rebellious, maybe.
Well, I also hear you saying that it was all about work, right? And if you were at Karen's, and you were at Karen's retreat yesterday, right, that we need to balance our lives among work, prayer, rest, and recreation. So
Yes, I'm very bad at that.
I encourage I put all 4 quadrants on my daily to-do list to make sure that I'm not letting work win.
Right, that's kind of what I was getting at there, is my to-do list were all about work or all about mow the lawn, do the dishes, make the cake.
Yeah.
And I think if that's going to work, yes.
That list will never end.
Oh, no, and you could just recycle it pretty much every week. It's the same.
We have another question back here, please.
Yeah, thank you both for the conversation. I really enjoyed hearing your questions and your perspective, and one of the comments you made was that you actively try to mitigate negative emotions. And I was wondering if you use specific strategies that you feel comfortable sharing with the group to do that, especially in the moment we're in.
I mean, I don't recommend my strategy. And this is where I will. She's not with us, so I can talk about my mom, right? So I was definitely raised in a house. So I don't think that's a good strategy. I want to say that. And I've spent some time, I think that I'm really open. I try to really be open about things. So like I've spent some time in therapy, and the therapist was finally like, Marianne, were you allowed to have negative emotions at home? And I was like, no. And she's like, well, what would happen when you had them? And the answer was, well, we ate something. And literally, when my mother was diagnosed with cancer, she called. I was coming home from grad school, or from here. It was 2007. And she said, like, what do you want me to buy to eat to feel better? And the answer was sour cream and onion Pringles. And as I like to say, at the end of the can of sour cream and onion Pringles, your mom still has cancer. So that is like something that I continue to work on, and making space for those negative emotions. Because when you stuff them down, whether it's with food or media or with, like getting in a fight with someone, I don't know, like what else people do. I'm sure people do other things, drinking. They don't go away. And so I think that you have to make space for those. So I don't have a good answer for that, other than it's something that I'm working on making, and I'm working on trying to make that space for my kid, right? Like of course you're really angry that it's time to, go to family reading time instead of watching YouTube, but we're still gonna do it. Yeah, so no, I don't have good, but I can tell you who my therapist was. She was pretty helpful.
Do you have any advice for how to find an appropriate balance between those negative emotions and positive emotions? Because I think that it's easy for us to tend to swing type toward one end of the spectrum, and like either be controlled by your negative emotions or to suppress them and just only allow yourself to focus on the positive.
Yeah, right. Toxic positivity has not been helpful, and there's been a lot of that in the self-help culture, right? And so I think the person that I would turn to without being able to pull up anything directly is Kate Bowler, who has a podcast, Everything Happens, and she has really good conversations with people about like living within that complexity of life. So I think that, one, it depends on what we're talking about, right? So if this is like a significant grieving event, whether it's the end of a relationship or a death or a diagnosis, or even like a grade on a test that's going to put your status in a program at risk, right? Those are like legitimate things that you need to make space for the emotion. But then I think sometimes what we need to do, at least what we do in the Mindful Life class, when we pick something that's keeping us from feeling at ease, is the phrasing that Jean uses, is we sit with that, whatever is leading to that, and we ask what it's trying to tell us. Like, what is under this? Is it that you're afraid of rejection? Is it that you're lonely? Is it that you are feeling unloved, uncertain, unworthy? There can be a lot of things. And so I think doing that, I guess I do have an answer. I think that practice, really kind of slowing down and listening, also works there. And therapy, I think that if depression is real, right? You can't will yourself into more neurotransmitters. So I think sometimes that we need, therapy and or medication if things are too out of balance. I want to be very, very clear about that. None of this, the secret is not real. I also want to go on the record of saying that, right? Like, we're not. Sure.
What was that name that you said?
Kate Bowler, Bowler.
I'm trying to put Good Enough by Kate Bowler.
Yeah, it's like
a
40 days of
series
devotion. I could bring that in and lend it to you too.
I think it's in the CAPS collection. I think
Okay.
I saw it
yeah.
there.
Maybe.
Go ahead.
Did you have it?
well,
Yeah, we'll come back to you, Tom,
fine.
since we heard from you.
What I heard you saying before about negative emotion wasn't exactly that you avoid feeling negative emotion. I thought I heard you say that you avoid that situation of being concerned about what someone else thinks that's negative about you. And I actually think that's sort of an interesting question. Like, what's the trick there?
Part of it is luck, right? I happen to have very supportive colleagues. Some
Right.
psychology departments are nightmares, right? Like, thank goodness I didn't get a job at those. So I think, that is part of it, is the environment in which you are, and I think being thoughtful, right? Like taking, and going back to this, not just being cognitive all the time, but being attuned to your emotions, right? If you always leave your book club feeling garbagey, stop going to that book club, right? Like you can even send the cookies if you feel bad that they're depending on your cookies, but I think they should be a little nicer to you. So I think that, and this is where mindfulness like comes into play, right? You have to be like present for what's happening, as opposed to just next thing, check off the list, check off my goal sheet. But like, what really just happened here, and is it nourishing me? And not that people can't get mad at me. Like I definitely do things that, I make mistakes, and I want to be there to own up to them and to do better as well, of course. But this is sort of, I'm thinking of like when people are critical just for this, when they're middle-aged mean girls, like you don't need to.
All right, Tony, I think we're going to let you bookend us here.
I'm going to go back to your question again about what to do with negative emotions. When I saw a therapist years ago, he said, I sense that you're practicing too much harm avoidance. He said, why don't you just openly acknowledge it, first of all, use it as an opportunity to know more about yourself, and then in turn, use it as an opportunity to get to know more about that other person as well, and maybe you can arrive at some kind of, let's say, reconciliation.
Yeah, I mean, you can hold those people with love and compassion, but
Yes,
still not want them to get your limited social, X hours that you have available.
that's right.
Because harm avoidance isn't great either, because then you miss out on things.
Yes,
right? Like
that's
I
right.
spent my postdoc year in Philly not going anywhere because I was terrified of like driving in the city, because I grew up in Painesville, Ohio. We don't really have traffic, and when you turn on your left turn signal, people slow down so you can go. Like it's not, I was not prepared.
Right.
And so I avoided so much, positive things. So I think that's important too, right? Being open.
And using it as an opportunity to get to know maybe more about yourself again.
Yeah.
And what you can handle and what you can't, and coming to terms with that level of acceptance as opposed to, as you know better, resignation.
Right.
All right, so we're just about at our time here. Thank you so much
Thank you
to
very
everyone
much.
for being here
Thanks for
this
being
afternoon. Thank you so much to Dr. Lloyd. Contemplative Community Week continues, as we were talking about before this. This is not just one week. We really are trying to help to create a community at this university. So if you are interested in more resources or connecting with the group down the road, you could scan this on the way out and find more information. But for now, would you all please join me in thanking Dr. Lloyd?